I wanted to, I had kind of a crisscross here where we are talking about our thought conditioner for the day, and it really went with something else that, thank you for that Advent scripture that we'll read at the end of the time. The thought conditioner for today comes from the book of Job, chapter 3, verses 25 and 25. Just knowing if you're listening. This thought conditioner states a very serious warning. How many like to be warned? You know, if you knew that there was a cliff and you were going 60 miles an hour and it was about half a mile away, you'd probably want to know that there was a cliff there, wouldn't you? You'd want to know that you'd go off the cliff and you'd die. So warnings are important. You know, one of the most important warning systems you have in your body is what? Pain. If you couldn't feel pain, you could chop off your hand or your arm or something like that, and you wouldn't even know it, and you'd bleed to death possibly. You understand what I'm talking about? So warning is very important. The thing which I greatly feared is come upon me, and that which I was afraid of is come unto me. This is a warning. This thought conditioner states a very serious warning. If over a long period of time, a person habitually fears something, there is a tendency for that fear to become their reality. Is your fear your reality? And I would have to say that if it's coming from the Bible, it's probably a reality to every human being that's ever lived. Maybe even the Savior himself, when he was going to the cross, he knew he was going to go to the cross. And at that point he said, I don't want to go to the cross. But he knew he was going there. It's going to be a reality. So, not to compare us with him, but for us, it's much more a great warning that our fear. How many can think of some fear that you've had that you still carry with you? Maybe it was a statement of your mother or father or a teacher or something that you heard even in a message, and you adopted that fear, and it's become a reality. Let me go on with it. For example, if you fear that you are going to fail and you constantly entertain thoughts of failure, you will create a mental condition that is propitious to failure. Now, propitious is an interesting word. An interesting word. It means to be favorable to. Propitious. It means to be favorable to. If you're favorable to fear, if you're favorable to fear of failure, you're thinking favorably to that failure. So you are propitious to thinking, or you're favorable to thinking that you're going to fail. Propitious is a favorable feeling, and that favorable feeling could be to something negative. This is a warning that we all should put in the back of our minds. Am I really thinking that I'm going to fail? I remember when I was a kid. I remember I was 8 years old. This is a very far past memory, and I can really remember it because I'm remembering it right now. And I was in Little League. And there was a 12-year-old kid that was pitching the ball. And that ball looked like it was going to really hurt if it hit me. And the catcher couldn't catch the ball because he'd throw it over here, then the next one would be over here, next one would bounce on the ground, and then say, batter up. And so I'm 8-year-old kid, and I'm gonna get out there and get batter, and this guy's throwing the ball all over the place, you know. And so the first one, you ran right out of the batter's box, you know, because just a fear. And it kind of goes with you until you can really overcome it in the batter's box. If you ever played baseball with a hard ball, and you've been hit by the ball and that kind of thing, I don't know how those guys get that out of their mind. But they're saying, you either pitch it over the plate or I'm going to hit it out or whatever. You have to have a very strong mind to stay in that batter's box when the ball's coming 100 miles an hour. I don't know how those guys do it. After they get hit by one or two, man, and you know, and knowing what happens to some of the guys, breaking jaws, breaking head. But we are susceptible, and we need this warning. We need this warning. Are you propitious or favorable to failure, thinking that you are a failure? The thing which we fear the most, he says, I was afraid, was to come to me. That's Job. So, he goes on, he says, creative, positive success factors are repelled by your mind because your mind is filled with defeat attitudes. This happens in relationships all the time. All the time. It's going to be a bad day because I have to be with this person. Or I have this bad meeting with this bad person. All these things. Okay. On the contrary, that's what we really want, is the contrary, right? On the contrary, if you hold faith thought, the positive thought, you will create about yourself an atmosphere propitious to success. To success, to health, and to well-being. So, one of the things, you know, when there's this COVID, Chinese flu, this attack by China on the United States of America to try to kill our people, and some of their people too, because they have lots of them, and they don't care about people, these leaders. That's a fact. But if you're propitious to success, to health, and to well-being, you're going to have this attitude that, yes, God's going to help me, and he's going to bless me. Think about, is your speech favorable? Do I whine? Do I complain? Do I think of say the things, the very first thing in the morning when you come up and the first person you see is, here's all the problems. Like Lou did today. I came here and all Lou did have was problems. He's got Pastor Rob, why don't you have all the problems? I said, I don't have any problems. Get out of here. Mr. Problem, leave. Yes. Thank you, Lou. Hallelujah. You got me on the right side. Is your speech favorable? Is the food you eat favorable? You know this is going to kill you, and then you go ahead and eat it anyway. That's why I only eat a little bit of ice cream. Since I haven't had ice cream for 3 nights in a row. Now, you know, I even went for almost a couple months without ice cream. And I lost like 20 pounds. But it was actually apples started to taste good. I think they tasted like they're really sugary. I was like, is this apple sugar? Of course, I guess it must have some kind of a sugar in it or something. After you've not eaten ice cream. How about the people that you hang around with? Do you see that as being a failing thing? You know, the people that you hang around with, why you hang around with them? Unless you love them and care about them. You're stupid if you don't. But that's another thing we shouldn't be, stupid. So this is an attitude warning that your fear could very well be the thought that you have, and it becomes self-fulfilling. Okay, so that's our thought for today. But it carried over, into my thinking about a message that I was reading by Jonathan Mayhew in the early parts of our country, and the idea of tyranny to tyrants is obedience to God. And he writes in his treatise, actually he is a pastor, he's writing in his sermon, and he talks about the doctrine in the passage of Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 8. He says these words, "The apostles' doctrine in the passage thus explained concerning the office of civil rulers and the duty of subjects, the people, may be summed up in the following observations." I'm not going to read all of the observations, but the main point that Paul is making to the citizens of Rome, listen to me, the citizens of Rome, the main theme. By the way, in the city of Rome, where were the Christians? Where were they? Some of them went to the Colosseum and were eaten by, like Pertula, by lions. Where were they, though? They were hiding in the catacombs under the ground of Rome. And he's writing this to them. Okay? And what he's basically saying is the end of what rulers should do, civil rulers, they are ministers of God to do good, the will of God. They are to follow the will of God so there will be a peaceable society. And that disobedience to rulers is a sin from a political standpoint. He talks about we don't want to he even talks about talking about civil authority and politics in the church. He says that disobedience to civil rulers in the due exercise of their authority is not merely a political sin, but a heinous offense against God and religion. So what he's saying is when we have rulers and they rule over us, we are committing a sin against God if we disobey them. And there's the ongoing use of that. If you want the context, he goes through it very detailed, that you must be obedient to the rulers because God has put them there for good. Until the one thing that he makes the statement to is if their rule is not good. And we know it's not good. It's not just, I don't like it, it's not the way I want it to be, like taxes or something of that nature. He said, yeah, you take taxes, money, nothing. I can get it from fish. So Jesus pulled it out, coin out of a fish. But when tyranny is an act against God, for example, abortion, you must rebel. You must rebel. You can't let the leader kill people for no reason. And by the way, for innocent people, babies. God is in the business of making life, not killing life. So then, they must stand up to that offense. Or you become part of the sin. He says it in a very direct way, but he goes through, most of his sermon is about how we should rule, how we should be obedient to rulers. But then he comes to the point that if in the end of all civil government be a good society, if this be the thing this is aimed at in constituting civil rulers, and if the motive and argument for submission to government be taken from the apparent usefulness of civil authority, it follows that when no such good end can be answered by submission, that means nothing good is happening about killing babies, there remains no argument or motive to enforce it. If instead of this good ends being brought about by submission, a contrary end is brought about and the ruin and misery of society affected by it, here is a plain and positive reason against submission in all cases, should they very happen. Suppose God requires a family of children to obey their father and not to resist him, and enforces his command with this argument, that the superintendence and care and authority of a just and kind parent will contribute to the happiness of the whole family, so that they ought to obey him for their own sakes more than for his. Suppose this parent at the length runs distract and attempts in his mad fit to cut all his children's throats. Now, in this case, is not the reason before assigned to do good why these children should obey their parent while he continued of a sound mind, namely their common good, a reason equally conclusive for disobeying and resisting him, since he is become delirious and attempts their ruin? In other words, if a leader is doing something and he's attempting to ruin the very people that he's the leader of, you must rebel. If a father starts beating his children to death, or a mother puts her child in a microwave oven, as has been done, or leave them in a trash can, as has been done, or be a doctor and mutilate them and kill them, and has been done, this is not to be obeyed. That's not what Romans 13 is talking about obeying your rulers. You obey the good. Now, we don't have that opinionated good. He said, if it's not the good for the people, and it is clear, just like millions and millions and millions of babies have been aborted in our country. You do not obey the ruler. Have we been obeying the ruler? Yes. Pay our taxes. Thank God that President Trump ended payment to Planned Parenthood from a federal basis. I don't know if that's news to you. Shame on you. See, it makes no alteration in the argument whether this parent, properly speaking, loses his reason, or does, while he retains his understanding, that which is a fatal in its consequence as anything he could do, were he really deprived of it. The similitude needs no formal application. You do not, in other words, obey a bad ruler. What he's doing is bad for the people. If we calmly consider the nature of the thing itself, nothing can well be imagined more directly contrary to common sense than to suppose that millions of people should be subjected to the arbitrary, precarious pleasure of one single man, who has naturally no superior over them in point of authority, so that their estates and everything that is valuable in life, even their lives also, shall be absolutely at his disposal, if he happens to be a wanton and capricious enough to demand them. What unprejudiced man can think that God made all to be thus subservient to the lawless pleasure and frenzy of one, so that it shall always be assigned to resist him. Nothing but the most plain and express revelation from heaven could make a sober, impartial man believe such monstrous, unaccountable doctrine, and indeed the thing itself appears so shocking, so out of all proportion, that it may be questioned whether all the miracles that ever were wrought could make it credible that this doctrine really came from God. At present, there is not the least syllable in Scripture which gives any countenance to it. But then, if unlimited submission and passive obedience to the higher powers in all possible cases be not a duty, it will be asked, how far are we obliged to submit? If we may innocently disobey and resist is some crisis, why not all? Where shall we stop? What is the measure of our duty? What is the measure of our duty? In this last paragraph, I'm not going to read the to conclude, but I'm going to read one sentence, because it has to do with Ezekiel, chapter 47, which we read yesterday, about the prince, the ruler. And Jonathan Mayhew, he's a pastor, and he's basically, this is what he's telling us: you obey the rulers. But there comes a point, if in obeying the ruler, the prince, the real prince, says no, then you don't obey anymore. You don't obey anymore. He may kill you. He may. But that's no big deal in eternity. But here's what he says. If our happiness to live under the government of a prince, and he doesn't say it with a lowercase word, it's all capitalized. Capital P, capital R, capital. He's talking about the Prince, Jesus, Yeshua. It is our happiness to live under the government of a prince who is satisfied with ruling according to the law as every other good, lowercase, prince will. We have to be completely dedicated to the prince. And he allows this prince, he allows the worldly prince sometimes to even carry out his punishment. He just allows it. Because why? Because we don't believe in the prince. That's where America is today. In many, but you know something? It's not all of America. It's not everybody. It's not the president of the United States. But it is these businesses, these newsmakers that lie. They just lie as purpose. It is these stations that will not even report the truth. That the judges and the leaders of the country are, in many cases, being paid off. Many loyal to China more than America. This is proven in facts. Oh, you're just saying that. Don't know the facts. Call Lou Highland of our church, and he'll give you all the facts. If you have enough time, or if you just don't want to know the facts. If you don't want to know the facts, then forget it. You're going to be bound by an eternity I don't know that this is an eternity that puts people in hell. I do not know that. I don't know about how God is as far as that. I'm not God, and I'm not going to make the judgment. But you know something? I surely would not want to sit in the face of God and say, I voted for abortion and killed millions of people. It might be what I would fear would be going before God, and there be 100 million, 200, 300 million babies just sitting in the same room, never got to live on earth. And God says, these are one that sacrificed their life for you to be with me. Some of my tax dollars, you know why I hate to pay taxes? Has nothing to do with paying taxes to a godly government. It says, if any of these dollars go to killing babies, I don't want it. There's two parties. There's the Democrats that want to abort babies. It's the Republicans that say no abortion. I pray to God that all those people that have received Jesus Christ, think about it. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. Read for yourself. It's Friday, John 1, 9 through 18.